Welcome everyone to Dropkick DiSKussions presented by Sportskeeda. I'm your host Korey Gunz, along with Sportskeeda's wrestling expert Tom Colohue, and we're recording today's show a little bit earlier than usual because I wanted to make sure that you, Tom, were well rested and ready to go because there's a lot going on this week in the world of wrestling.
It does make a change, I've got to say. It's 6 o'clock here at the minute. I'm sat next to a window and there's daylight streaming through. It's different. I feel strange. I don't like it.
Well, I'll tell you what else was maybe some people thought was a little bit strange was the Money in the Bank match, which was obviously this past Sunday. A lot of speculation about what exactly the Money in the Bank match would look like, what it would feel like. We knew it was going to be something different, and it definitely was that. What was your reaction just to the match as a whole, just watching it on the network, for the first time when you saw it live? What was just your initial reaction as a fan to what we were seeing and, again, this cinematic element that the WWE has been giving us lately?
Well, I've put a full review up on my own YouTube, so if anyone wants to check that out, just search my name on YouTube. But I'll touch on this just briefly on everything that happened, because my first time watching it, sitting there live at I think about 2 o'clock in the morning, I was pretty much hooked immediately. Even just the simple things like Carmella's squeaky shoes and Baron Corbin coming out and doing the smack talk during his entrances, because obviously they couldn't hear the music that was piped in after, or Michael Cole's commentary just at the end. Here's how this person won this match, when he clearly hadn't seen it yet. So it was chaos. It was mad. It was beautiful and strange. And as someone who likes that element of it, the sports entertainment rather than the wrestling, this was just for me. They filmed lots of different things. They had a couple of directing units. So while you had Vince McMahon, AJ Styles and Daniel Bryan in one section being recorded, you had Otis and John Laurinaitis in another one, for example. But I will say quite a bit was cut out, and hopefully some of that surfaces at some point. I was a bit surprised at how Shayna Baszler was put out, just going on to some negatives. She was hit by 3 attacks, and it didn't feel like she was being put out, but she never made it to the roof. And I think Elias needed a bit of a stronger moment because he hit Corbin with his guitar. It looked like that feud would continue, but now something else is happening. And then immediately we had the thing with the case, which took many attempts to film, I'll say that. So I think they could have done certain things a little better, but all in all, one hell of a ride.
What did you think of it compared to the Boneyard match and the Firefly Funhouse match? This is really the first cinematic match we've seen that had some elements of wrestling in it. I know they were still brawling through the building and all that kind of stuff, but at the end, you still had the match culminate in a ring, kind of more used to what we're seeing, people trying to climb the ladder and get the briefcase, so it was a little bit more familiar to an actual match than what we saw with the Boneyard match and the Firefly Funhouse match. So how would you compare this to those two, and how do you think it translated into seeing an actual wrestling match filmed and produced in this manner?
You say there's a lot more wrestling, and ultimately there is, but at the same time there was a lot more parody in this. I wouldn't expect to see a food fight in a Bray Wyatt match. I wouldn't expect to see Doink appear out of the grave during the Boneyard match, for example. It was a very different style, and something that they've really only just started playing with at the moment. It's a shame that they don't still have certain people who would really thrive in these environments, like Zack Ryder. It's a shame we're not seeing the fashion files and stuff like that anymore. Gallows and Anderson would have been beautiful for this with everything they did with Southpaw Regional Wrestling. I'd say it's a very different match, very worth a watch, but at the same time they managed to keep it different enough that it really was something unique. We can have all 3 of these different kinds of matches all in the same strange universe at the same time without stepping on any toes.
We're going to be talking about the women's portion of the match in more detail here in just a second. So let's focus on the men's Money in the Bank ladder match. Otis, of all people, comes out with the win. Like you said, there was a little bit of shenanigans going on with the briefcase itself, with him ultimately ending up in possession of it. But Otis gets the win. What'd you think? I think definitely an upset pick. I didn't see anyone on social media and the like picking Otis to win. Me and you had our Money in the Bank preview on the show last week. Neither of us picked him as our winner. So what'd you think of Otis getting the win here and becoming the new Mr. Money in the Bank?
I was very surprised, I've got to admit. He looked like he was just there to fill the card and have a couple of small moments, things that keep things exciting and make you think, oh, well, maybe he won't. Oh, no, he won't. In the end, winning it, especially in the way he did, there was a large element of luck. And I'd imagine there's going to be a lot of competition for that briefcase because 3 men had their hands on it. One of them on Raw, so the wildcard might work out for that. He was a complete outlier in betting and in the favoritism. I didn't see anyone on social media. When the match was taking place between him and Dolph Ziggler, I thought to myself, what if he wins? And I tweeted about it. But it opens up a few options. It's a positive move for him individually, but I think the SmackDown main event scene is quite weak at the moment. There aren't many people at the top. And unfortunately, I just don't think he's the answer to it at the moment.
What do you think his tag team partner Tucker's thinking right now? I mean, they were brought in, as a tag team, heavy machinery, and then Otis kind of just finds himself in this storyline with Mandy and with Dolph Ziggler and Sonya, and it kind of just takes off. And taking nothing away from Otis, I mean, he definitely is a charismatic guy. He entertains me in just about anything that he's involved in. But what do you think Tucker's thinking right now? Is heavy machinery as a unit, is that something that now we can officially kind of put an end to and say that that's something in the past, that Otis is now going to be primarily a singles competitor now that he's got a hold of the Money in the Bank briefcase?
The tag team is still ongoing. They are still a tag team, even though I doubt they're going to be that involved at the moment. But for Tucker, I hope he sees the opportunity in this for him as well. I look back at, for example, Dolph Ziggler with the briefcase, Big E and AJ Lee with him. They both benefited from that connection. And I think with Otis being as popular as he is, that will pass to Tucker as well. Hopefully he sees the opportunity and hopefully he takes up every opportunity he can get from it. We'll have to see how much time the tag team gets. I can't imagine it's going to be too much at the moment, but even just making his entrance with Otis will be good for him in the long run.
Well, we said we were going to talk about the women's Money in the Bank match in a little bit more detail, and so let's fast forward now to Monday Night Raw on Monday, and obviously Asuka had a big role to play here in the opening segment, but really the headline was obviously Becky Lynch not only relinquishing the Raw Women's Championship to Asuka and revealing that the Money in the Bank match was actually for the title and not just the briefcase itself, but also that Becky Lynch is pregnant, that she is expecting a child, and that is the reason why she has to take some time off, relinquish the title. Obviously a very real situation, and congratulations to Becky and Seth Rollins as well on their upcoming birth of their new child. Now, first thing I want to ask you, because I know I saw you address it on social media, and a lot of people, want to come at insiders, which I know you don't like that term, or come at journalists and say, well, I told you so, or they try to point the finger at people that didn't know what was going on, because there was a lot of talk before the event that Becky was going to take time off. There was rumors that maybe she was injured. Pregnancy was something that was rumored at the time, but there was a lot going on around Sunday and then leading up to Monday about what this big announcement that Becky was going to make was. I saw you address it, like I said, on social media, that you did not report Becky as being pregnant, that you did not put that out there. You were not putting your name on any type of report about what this announcement was going to be. Tell our audience just a little bit about why you didn't know what was going on, or maybe better yet, that you just didn't ask what was going on with Becky Lynch before Monday night.
Well, firstly, I'll address the insider term there, and I'll say this very briefly. I don't like the term insider because it suggests that I'm in the trenches with those wrestlers. They are constantly putting their bodies on the line. I ain't part of that. There are people who talk to me. I can report some of that. I can't report some of that. And really, when I'm talking to people and getting information, as it were, I'm just catching up with my friends. So I can't, in good conscience, take the term insider, because I feel the people who do that are doing it for their own sense of grandeur. Commenting on this, and to take a tangent there, journalists should still be learning their craft even long after they've retired. We should all still be learning and growing. And when I reported that Becky was going to take time off after WrestleMania to get married, I got a lot of backlash for reporting something so personal, even though it's something now that she's come out and said that was the plan. Now, I apologize at the time, and I learned from that. And then from Monday Night Raw, I got a huge amount of "I told you so" tweets when I decided not to speculate on the possibility of Becky Lynch being pregnant. There was nothing ironclad. There was absolutely nothing. And if 15 legitimate sources came to me and said, Becky Lynch is pregnant, report it, I would not do it. Because how is this in public interest? My job as a journalist is to inform the public of things they need to know. That's my job. Things that are of public interest. Her being pregnant is not of public interest if 2 hours later she's going to announce it. And if there's no guarantee that she is pregnant, why don't you wait 2 hours? Because she's going to announce it. I got a lot of "I told you so" tweets, and I'm happy for my decision. There's no way I can win here with reporting things that are too personal and getting stick, or not reporting something because it's personal and getting stick. But I'm sticking with not talking about Becky's personal life and future. I got too personal. I should not have said that originally, and I choose to stand my ground here.
Something else people seem to speculate on when this announcement was made was, I guess people were kind of counting back the months and trying to get the timing of this. Some people were wondering or speculating if Becky Lynch possibly worked WrestleMania while pregnant, maybe whether she knew it at the time or not, and that kind of became another social media thing. People discussing, about maybe the WWE forced her to compete at WrestleMania, or just all kinds of just crazy nonsense things. Do you want to comment at all on the speculation or people thinking that Becky worked WrestleMania pregnant? I mean, do you want to clarify any of that if there's anyone out there thinking that may actually be a real thing?
I will, because this is basically just a firm fact that I can rebut all of this with. WrestleMania was recorded in late March. Becky Lynch did an interview with People magazine that was released just after she announced her pregnancy, where she stated that she did not know she was pregnant until early April. It is not possible that she could have knowingly wrestled pregnant on that timescale, and it is certainly not possible that the company would have known she was pregnant before she did. So I don't see how they could have forced her.
So there you go. So now let's turn to the wrestling aspect of this. Like we said, because of Becky Lynch being pregnant, Asuka is now the Raw Women's Champion after winning the Raw Women's Championship in the Money in the Bank ladder match. It was kind of interesting to me to see the promo on Monday because of her reaction to Becky's announcement. She was very happy, gave her a hug, all that stuff, which you would probably expect. But is Asuka now a face? She had kind of played a heel, maybe even a tweener here recently. She's been very entertaining, again, on commentary. I thought she was very entertaining with her antics during the Money in the Bank ladder match itself. So is Asuka kind of turned face now? Is she going to be on the the good guy side of things going forward, or is this maybe just a one night thing, a very real reaction from a fellow competitor of a very real situation, and then maybe we'll see her slide back over to the heel side of things in the coming weeks?
It's a little bit of both. She was not aware that Becky Lynch was pregnant, but she knew that she'd be getting the title, so that was a very, very real reaction. That was very genuine and really heartfelt, but they would not have allowed that to happen if Asuka was still going to be a heel going forwards. You think back to when Becky Lynch was injured just before Survivor Series and she hugged Charlotte. That was a real genuine moment that a lot of people on Twitter went crazy about because it broke kayfabe. They're not going to want to do that, especially when it would have been so easy to do that backstage. Asuka, I do believe, at this point doesn't need to be a face, and I think that's why they're endorsing her in that way. Becky really endorsed Asuka, not just by giving her the title in this manner, but just the hug and really supporting her and saying go and be dominant and all that. It's good for Kyrie as well by association, but I think Asuka needs to be a face. Your top women on Raw right now are Asuka, Nia Jax, and Shayna Baszler. They can't all be heels. Asuka looks like she's definitely going to be the face going forwards.
Now, CM Punk made an interesting comment this week about the situation. He called the whole Asuka-Becky Lynch segment a, quote, missed opportunity for the WWE. What are your thoughts on his opinion of the way that this situation was handled and maybe his theory about how he would have handled it if he were in the WWE's position?
CM Punk said that he wanted Asuka to maybe take that and then spit the mist into Becky's face, really ensuring that she is a heel while all the eyes were on her. If she's not a heel, that's not going to work out.
Now, before we kind of wrap up this topic, I do want to ask probably a couple of maybe unpopular questions or viewpoints, but I have seen things like this swirling around on social media, so I thought it might be something interesting to talk about. First thing I want to ask you about is your opinion on, does a situation like this where, a women's wrestler announces her real-life pregnancy, wrestling is still presented, even though we know it's sports entertainment, it's still, in essence, presented as a sport. It's presented as an athletic competition. So we're supposed to suspend belief that when we see two women in a match that they are fighting, for something, and they are in a wrestling match. So when an announcement like this takes place and it, breaks kayfabe and kind of, breaks that suspension of disbelief, are you of the opinion that this in any way takes fans out of women's wrestling or kind of takes them out of the fantasy when they use something like a real-life pregnancy as a reason for someone to relinquish the title? Or, should have been done more kind of like what CM Punk alluded to, maybe a more old-school way where Becky Lynch gets taken out with an injury, or, Asuka spits the mist in her face, or does something that still keeps it more wrestling-like, instead of just coming out and saying, hey, I'm pregnant, so I've got to give up the title?
In the modern wrestling era, there is no way to escape the fact that kayfabe is going to be broken from time to time. They can take as much willing suspension of disbelief as possible, and when you look at the cinematic matches that have been happening recently, that has definitely been happening. But if someone is pregnant, particularly someone as mainstream and as major a star as Becky Lynch, and a top champion, she's really done great things for that belt, you have to accept that moments like this are going to happen. The WWE have chosen to roll with the punches and just be honest. I think they should be applauded for that.
And then what's your opinion on women being held to a different standard in regards to their responsibility to the job? I saw people on social media talking this week that, well, because she was the champion and because she's had this huge push, she's had almost a 400-day reign as champion, that, and I can't believe really I'm going to say this or that we're talking about this when we're talking about wrestling, but that she should have taken more responsibility to, I guess, not get pregnant, and so to screw up storyline angles on television because she was the women's champion, and so therefore her getting pregnant screws things up, and she should have been more responsible. Or maybe decided to take some time off before trying to get pregnant. Like I said, it feels weird to even be saying these words and talking about this, but it is something I've seen people, apparently there are fans out there that have that viewpoint when it comes to this. What would your response to be to that, and what's your view on that sort of line of thinking?
Firstly, I'd say there are definitely some things more important than wrestling. So anyone who thinks that Becky Lynch is being irresponsible here, well, they can go to hell, essentially. If Becky Lynch has gone pregnant, we don't know, and we will never know if she wanted to, if they had planned to, if this was an intention at the time. We don't know how much time off she had booked anyway. We don't know, and it's okay not to know. As regards women being held to a certain standard of responsibility, there are ways to look into this a bit deeper. I don't think in any way that Becky's being irresponsible. Women should not be punished for choosing to have children, and Becky certainly is not going to be. At the same time, Becky's return, should it happen, shouldn't take away from someone who has been there the whole time and reached the top. She shouldn't be parachuted in and, everything continues like she was never gone, because she has been gone. We have to accept the reality of the situation. We do know that Becky's had some offers to go into film work, and she may work towards that. So we can't say when or if we'll see her in the WWE again. That's up to her. But when it comes to this particular question, it is something that does need a little bit of asking. I don't think there is any question marks as to how responsible Becky Lynch has been. She is pregnant and she will have a child. That is literally the be-all and end-all of it. There is no question of responsibility to the job for this. But you will have some women choosing to not have children and focus on wrestling. You will have that, and that's their choice, and that is fine for them. This is fairly new because of the recency that women's wrestling has reached this top level, this top echelon. So it's a question we're going to see asked a lot more in future. I don't know what the answer is going to be, but that's a debate for people who are actually involved. Thankfully, I'm just a pundit, and this is one of many, many times when I'm very, very grateful to be a man and not have to deal with all the weird and wonderful things that go on with female bodies that I don't have to deal with. This so much. Women have to deal with so much just by virtue of being a woman, and I feel so incredibly grateful that I do not have to deal with that.
I'm not really where to go from that. I'm not sure how we segue from that into into our next topic, so I'm just going to move on to the other big development that we saw happen on Raw was the announcement of what's essentially a new wild card rule. They're calling it, I think, now the Raw SmackDown Invitational, but essentially, guys, the wild card rule is back in effect, where people from SmackDown can challenge people from Raw and so on and so forth. We know that the first matchup we're going to get next week on Raw is going to be Drew McIntyre against Baron Corbin. You seem to report that there may be a little bit of disagreement between WWE, Fox, and USA about implementing this new version of the wild card rule. What can you tell us about that?
I can tell you the full report is up on Sportskeeda at the moment, should anyone want to read. But WWE, Fox, and USA are in disagreement about what they want out of this wildcard rule, and in fact, if they want this wildcard rule. USA Network is pushing for it to return, but they also want a return to prominence for the 24/7 Championship. That's a title they brought in and wanted to see brought in with the idea that it would be crossing brands and everything there and really given prominence. Of course, now it's not on TV and may not even exist anymore. Who knows? Fox would rather see more drafts, but don't want all the advertising for competitors that comes with that. They don't really want to see stars come on knowing that they will have to have on their programming, oh, this person wrestles over on USA Network. There was question marks about that when NXT invaded. WWE needs some flexibility, though. So what they want out of this is very different to what USA and Fox want. They are looking to deal with the fact that they have a lot less wrestlers available now. Some of that is entirely on themselves when it comes to people they've chosen to release, but also there are some wrestlers, obviously, who have chosen not to work at the moment. So they need to do quite a lot with a small amount of people. They want to expand that pool and get a potential ratings boost by doing that. That's what they're hoping for, at least.
Now, the common tagline with this that people are going to point to is that, well, because the ratings are low, they're going to use the wild card rule to try to get more big names on both Raw and SmackDown. But we've talked about on the show, and you've said many times, that the WWE is not concerned with ratings. They always expect the ratings to be low this time of year. Both Fox and USA also have those same expectations. They haven't been, bothered by the low ratings. So if that is the case, why the panic? Do you see this as a panic move by the WWE that we're going to bring back the wild card rule again because we got to get some bigger names on these shows in the hopes of increasing ratings? Or is it something else completely different?
There's always a panic for ratings, but it never originates from WWE. Fox are very happy with the ratings. USA are quite happy with the ratings for NXT, but the Raw ratings they're not too happy with right now. WWE aren't the ones spearheading this decision. They like the flexibility, but it's not them who are pushing hardest for it. The USA Network is pushing hardest for it. And it's not necessarily for ratings. Ratings aren't necessarily the first reason, because I've talked about the flexibility and return for the 24/7 and so on. It's not just about ratings. There is a hope that it will stabilize ratings, but we saw last year with the wildcard, it didn't. It just fit the exact schedule of ratings that happens every year. WWE really aren't that worried about the ratings. But when fans are, and when wrestling journalists are, and when people won't stop talking about it, they usually decide to do something.
I don't think we could talk about Raw without touching on the character development we saw from Seth Rollins. After he lost his match to Drew McIntyre at Money in the Bank, he comes out on Raw. I mean, just great stuff, I thought. The look that he had, the hair. I think when I saw him come out, you would have thought that him and Becky had already had the baby. He looks like I do after a couple of sleepless nights, with a newborn. So I thought maybe they'd already had the baby and they were just fooling all of us. But I mean, just you have to appreciate the commitment. Whatever direction they're taking Seth in, I'm not exactly sure because me and you have both talked about that after that finish at Money in the Bank, we thought that maybe that was the start of him turning face. But on Raw, it seemed like no, at least, not so fast, my friend. They're maybe be going the opposite direction. Just tell me, what did you think about the direction that Seth Rollins took on Monday? And like I said, just the new look, the facial expressions, not to mention the attack on Rey Mysterio, which I thought was also well done with the eyeball on the edge of the stairs. And I know how you are with screwdrivers and ears, so I can't imagine what you were thinking about steel steps inside the eye.
Yeah, cheers for that one. Yeah, first off, you have to stop stealing my lines, because I definitely had to say, regarding this one, I admire his commitment so much. He really made that work, and I broke out laughing numerous times. And I would have done if I was in his position, I'll tell you that. Stood on that apron with Aleister Black right there, I would have just burst out laughing. When it comes to the Money in the Bank finish, I do think they are still going face, despite what happened. And I think the reason I think that is because Seth went to apologize after he injured Rey. I don't know whether this is going to be a whole Bray Wyatt the Fiend thing, but he definitely had an out-of-body experience, attacked Rey as he did. I chose to hide behind myself, as you might expect. But if he was a face, if he was a heel, he would not have apologized. So I'm not sure entirely which way they're going, but they're leaving their options open.
Is Seth still expected to be pretty much a full-time competitor, notwithstanding, obviously, the fact that his girlfriend, soon-to-be wife, is pregnant and is taking time off? Is he still expected to be, a full-time competitor on Raw, at least until, the birth of the child?
He is. There was some speculation in a report out that said Seth's under no obligation to wrestle. That's just not true. Seth will still be wrestling. Meanwhile, Becky Lynch is obviously going to go home and grow a child in her. There's miracle of life stuff there. Seth will take time off when his contract allows it, and the WWE management is supportive of that. He is under an obligation to wrestle because he does have a contract that needs to be respected. I know obviously some people are opting out of wrestling at the moment, but it's for a very different reason, and Seth isn't that guy. He's going to choose to continue wrestling because he's Seth Rollins, and that's what Seth Rollins does.
Now, on the other side of the coin, what were your thoughts on seeing both Rey Mysterio and Aleister Black on Raw on Monday, a night after being thrown off of a freaking building at Money in the Bank?
I am a kind of a big fan of these ridiculous things because I think AJ Styles is well established that the WWE cinematic universe is not quite the same as the standard WWE universe. It's only death. It's not actually a big deal. So what, right?
I guess so. I guess both Rey Mysterio and Aleister Black are both bigger than death, I expect. And I guess that also gets Baron Corbin off the hook for a murder charge.
Oh, yeah, definitely. We don't need to chase that. We don't need to ask any questions about Baron Corbin murdering two people. It's fine.
Now, turning to the SmackDown side of things, story broke officially just today, a little bit before we started recording this, I believe, that there were rumors of it beforehand, but officially announced today that Sami Zayn was going to be stripped of the Intercontinental Championship. Now, tell us a little bit about why Zayn is being stripped of the title and kind of what the timeline was for both Zayn coming to this decision to not compete and also the WWE's decision to decide that we need to take the belt off of him for the foreseeable future.
Well, they asked Sami a few times if he was ready to come back. It's been a gradual process. He's not been able to say very certainly that, look, I will not be back until recently. He came to his decision after he went to work for WrestleMania. Obviously had the match there, retained the belt. I don't know what made his decision for him. I'm sure he has his own personal reasons, so I'm just going to leave the speculation there. Either way, the WWE, knowing he is not returning, at least for the foreseeable future, decided they had to rewrite a lot of storylines. So they came up with the idea to strip him of the belt and put on a tournament.
Is this, and I know you said it may be speculation at this point, but is this a situation where Zayn had a change of heart about competing somewhat recently? Because obviously the question's going to be asked that if the WWE knew that he didn't want to compete during this pandemic and performing in the Performance Center and all that, then what was the point of putting the belt on him in the first place?
We're in an ever-changing situation here. So it could be that he simply made his decision late on based on new information, but that is speculation. We have no fact to go on here, at least until Sami has an interview where he decides to talk about it. With no fact to go on, I will leave it there.
With Zayn gone, what type of effect do you think this has on Shinsuke Nakamura and Cesaro?
Well, at the moment, they've pretty immediately been paired up with Baron Corbin, which will at least give them someone new to lead them. The WWE, unfortunately, have a general belief that neither Cesaro nor Nakamura have the right amount of charisma to be in a solo position or have a leadership role. And with everything they're rewriting around Sami Zayn, they need someone else to talk for them. So for now, they've paired them up with Corbin. After that, it's really hard to see.
Now, of course, obviously with Zayn gone now, they're going to be looking for someone new to put the IC title on. When I was thinking about potential contenders, I thought back to a guy like Sheamus, who, when he was making his return to SmackDown, he talked a lot in promos about wanting to win the Intercontinental Championship. It was the one championship he hadn't held, that's what he was gunning for. That kind of aspect of his character has kind of been toned down since his actual on-screen return. But to me, that's a guy that jumps out at me that, hey, they could rekindle that part of his character. They could kind of get those promos going back again, and maybe he would be a prime guy that would be a candidate to put the Intercontinental title on, and he would have a ready-made feud for the championship with Jeff Hardy. What would you think about Sheamus as a potential IC champ, or do you think there's another name out there that would look good with the belt?
Sheamus talked about the IC title a lot because originally there was a plan to have Sheamus against Braun Strowman for the IC title at WrestleMania, but that's one of many things that underwent very late changes. Obviously the title changed and then Strowman has ended up being the Universal Champion. We could still see that feud, but having Strowman feud with The Fiend has sort of suggests Sheamus won't be tangling with him soon. With everything going on now, we may still see Sheamus revisiting the IC title. They need people in that tournament, and they don't have that large a group. So I think we'll probably see Sheamus and Jeff Hardy both in the IC scene sooner rather than later. But we could also see Nakamura and Cesaro there, of course. Cesaro and Sheamus do have a little bit of a competition going on for that belt in particular.
Also on Monday, we saw the official announcement for our first match at Backlash, which is going to be Edge versus Randy Orton in a rematch from WrestleMania, only this time, as Orton put it, just a wrestling match. No stipulations, no last man standing, just a pure wrestling match. We talked about this a little bit last week, and based on last week's discussion, I thought this came as a little bit of a surprise to me that these two would be having another match with each other. Do you think that at Backlash this will be the end of the feud, or is this just another layer to this story that we may see the ultimate conclusion of later on down the road?
To me, with this match that they've added in, we both know it's going to be the greatest wrestling match ever.
Oh, God, I was going to ask you about that, too.
Yeah, I don't even want to touch on that. The whole of Raw was slightly ruined by that moment. The hyperbole, my word. But this match just looks like they've kind of kicked the can down the road. They're just keeping it going. There's still an appetite backstage for a Rated RKO reunion, but it comes down to who's available and what Edge is ready for. They don't want to push him too hard when he's just returned, but it's also possible that whatever intended challenger they did have for him just isn't available right now with so many people not there. And of course, this is one of the reasons they're looking at the wildcard rule. So I think they just needed to give him another match in a pre-arranged schedule. They decided on this one. Or we're being too cynical, and it really is going to be the best wrestling match ever.
God. Is that something they're going to build on, or was that just Charlie Caruso?
Oh, that's the tagline.
Freestyling. I don't understand. Is this going to be something are they going to come out and Greco-Roman wrestle, or what is? I don't understand what the deal is with tagging this match as could be the greatest wrestling match ever. That came out of left field for me.
Know.
I don't get it.
It just completely broke the moment. She just stands between the two of them while they glare at each other and says that. I can't. I just can't.
Last thing we'll talk about before we wrap up the show today, which And I think this is the greatest podcast of all time. I'll go on the record as saying that. So before we wrap this one up, after Money in the Bank Sunday, we saw the first episode in the Undertaker's Last Ride documentary. If you haven't seen it, go check it out. It's going to be a 5-part series. This was just episode 1. You've never seen The Undertaker like this, the behind-the-scenes stuff, the interviews that he does basically out of character. I mean, it's really a first time we've seen, really not The Undertaker, but Mark Calaway talking about being The Undertaker, and it's a great watch. He did make an interesting quote in it, though. He was talking about his schedule and working WrestleManias only, and that he wanted to make sure that his last match was a WrestleMania match that was befitting the Undertaker character, and that he didn't feel like he had that, for example, with Roman Reigns, which would be why we've seen him kind of make some of these mini comebacks in the last couple of years. Do you think that when we're talking about a match befitting the Undertaker's last match, what we saw with the Boneyard match at this past WrestleMania, do you think that could have been it with the cinematic values and all that, that was a match that the Undertaker or Mark Calaway could live with as the swan song for the Undertaker?
It may be for the fans, but that doesn't mean it is for the Undertaker. You've got to consider the Undertaker has been planning his last match for about 10 years now. He says in the documentary, every time he gets out, they start pulling him back in. And right after that Roman Reigns match, he had a casket match in Saudi Arabia with Rusev and Aiden English, neither of whom were with the company anymore. Casket match, looked good, beat both men. That would have been a good way to go out, but he decided to keep going. And the WWE are hoping with the Boneyard match format, it will allow The Undertaker to have one last run before calling it completely. But it's up to The Undertaker what he does next. At the moment, he is not officially retired.
Yeah, like I said, if you haven't checked it out, make sure you go and watch it. A lot of good stuff in that, and that's going to be a continuing documentary for the next couple of weeks. So definitely check that out if you're an Undertaker fan like Tom and I are. And we thank you all for listening in again to this week's Dropkick Discussions. Please make sure that you like and comment on this video up on our YouTube channel and subscribe to the Sportskeeda YouTube channel itself. While you're there, you can also subscribe to Tom's personal YouTube channel as well to get even more wrestling news and notes. He posts his own personal videos on there each week, so you can make sure that you check those out. Follow Tom on Twitter at Colohue. I'm at Korey Gunz, and you can check out Sportskeeda.com for the latest wrestling news and articles. We thank you for joining us again this week, and we will see you next time on Dropkick Discussions.